Right. So, thinking about our podcast and our podcast guest today, I did some brainstorming, and one of the things that came to my mind was all the confusion around food. And food is such a hot topic these days, and it's very polarizing. And people get on a vegan agenda, they get on a carnivore agenda, and it can become very dogmatic, and I would say much more confusing. And our guest today is going to talk about like what she has learned from a totally different perspective, and not coming from like an American perspective, but one from like an entirely different country as an American, and then bringing that knowledge back. So some of the things that in my own corporate like escape, well, I didn't escape corporate, but I evaded corporate. I was actually really called, you guys, to stay home with my kids. And I was not called into a career right off the bat as a younger person. And what I did is I stayed home with my children, my four children, for 7 years. And with that came a lot of like growing pains. And I felt there was a lot of responsibility to create these humans that are like emotionally intelligent, they're kind, they're making the world a better place. Like that really was my goal. So my corporate evasion was being a stay-at-home mom. And when you have a bunch of babies, you gain a bunch of baby weight. So my kind of springboard into this confusing world, right, of diet and exercise and all this stuff came from Kevin Trudeau and his book, Natural Cures. I did my first juice fasting weekend. I did a sardine fast, like all this crazy stuff to lose my baby weight. And I exercised. I did kickboxing for like an entire year, and it took me a year to lose my baby weight, and I've kept it off basically my whole life since then. And but it's always evolving and it's always changing. And I feel like, like moving with new information, I feel like sometimes we get really dogmatic about, like people get really passionate about the way we eat. And I feel like I've always had an open mind about like, I mean, I'll try this. And I've like, always experimented on my own body. And we all have a unique um, biology. We all have a unique genealogy, right? Like everything that goes into our genetic makeup is so different. What works for one person that might not work for another. And I think that it's really an interesting topic that our guest today, Tania, like she's coming from this very, I want to say like, I kind of call it like a black sheep perspective, right? Like as the masses are being pushed into this vegan agenda, Tanya's got a really interesting message that's going against that. And it brings to mind a little cartoon that I saw yesterday. And it was all the people are running off the cliff. And there's one person that's like, pushing against the crowd, and they're literally gonna plummet to their deaths. And the person that's pushing against the crowd is the one they're saying, you're insane. Right? They're all pointing to that person. They're like, you're the insane person because you're running away from the cliff because you're moving away from the masses. Anyway, but I love that as a like rebellious contrarian myself. I love your message, Tania. So Thaddeus, with that, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yeah, so thank you. And Tania, welcome to the podcast. And why don't you start out by just telling everybody where they can find you if they want to interact or see some of your stuff?
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Thaddeus, for that lovely introduction. Yeah, you can find me at bordeauxkitchen.com or on Instagram. I'm on Tania Teschke, and the name spelling might be in your podcast title. So you'll see it there and you can find me. But if you look up Bordeaux, like the town in France, or the Bordeaux wine, bordeauxkitchen.com, that's where you can find me.
Can you summarize a little bit about like your story? So you've got the Bordeaux Kitchen, and people are going to want to know like, what is the Bordeaux Kitchen about, and what is your story, Tania?
Yeah, thanks. Well, so the Bordeaux Kitchen started when I moved to Bordeaux, France. My husband is in the Foreign Service, so he was posted to Bordeaux for later in his career to be the consul in that southwest region of France. And sort of by that time in my life, I had realized that I needed to up my game in terms of nutrition for my kids. And Heidi, like you said, you found your calling to be being at home with your felt a really strong calling at that point. This was in 2013, so about 11 years ago, to feed my two daughters better and to really learn how to cook. And what better place than France, right? And at the time, I was also having some depression and fatigue. And so I was trying to figure that out. And in what ended up being a little bit of biohacking, really. I didn't really know about the ancestral movement or the paleo movement, but by 2013, as I was learning about food and nutrition, I kind of honed in on this. I discovered the ancestral and at that time paleo crowd, really, and then what led to some biohacking as well. And anyway, I just was very eager to learn a lot of recipes and to collect them somehow. And I'm a photographer, so I was also, because Bordeaux is a wine region and it's beautiful, I would run around taking pictures of people's vineyards, and I ended up asking them questions. Well, why are you doing this? And what about that? And so I learned from winemakers about making wine and, kind of put all this knowledge together, the health, the wine, the photography, the food recipes. And it ended up being this book, The Bordeaux Kitchen. And because I started in Bordeaux, I called it The Bordeaux Kitchen. And that was kind of what came to me. It was like, you have to call this The Bordeaux Kitchen. I said, okay, I'll do it.
So if you haven't seen the book, this is like a textbook size tome. I mean, it is huge. And I can't believe that Tania wrote. I mean, there's so many words in here.
I can't believe you wrote it, Tania.
It's like I'm an author as well. And I look at this book and I'm like, oh my gosh.
We're in awe of it.
So the photos, the amount of work it took to put this together, it's like an encyclopedia of French cooking and French food. And I love this book. So if you
and history.
In the history. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, check it out. I one thing that you said, Tania, you said like,
I just want to see something.
When you got to Bordeaux, like you were learning how to cook. So were you like into cooking before you moved to Bordeaux? Like what types of things were you doing and how did it transition when you arrived in Bordeaux and changed the way you did things?
Yeah, it's a good question. The little backstory leading up to it was that we, moved around. And before we got to Bordeaux, we were posted to Moscow for 4 years, and I was basically feeding my girls, soy nuggets. It's so embarrassing now. I can't believe it, how nutrient deficient and harmful those crappy things are. But I was backing up even further before I had kids. When I was 25, I had an appendix rupture, which I believe was due to several factors, one of which was really malnourishment. I had been, a vegetarian in college for a few years, and I think over 2 or 3 years became extremely malnourished, even though I had grown up in a traditional, I'd say immigrant home, German and Indian, where we ate, good food all the time and home cooking. But as soon as I was separated from that in college, I was influenced by those around me. And, and they cooked a lot of the people cooked, not meat, but really vegetarian items. And so because of my ignorance and lack of really motivation and interest to be in the kitchen for whatever reason, I just wanted to study instead, or, hang out with friends. that I just became malnourished and evaded the sort of the whole world of cooking and nutrition. I didn't even know it existed, that there was such a thing as nutrition. But when you have children, as you know, Heidi, you begin to realize there people depending on you, and you really want to up your game and feel better too. Like I said, I was, fatigued and depressed. And after 4 years straight in Moscow with the winters there, it was really hard to stay healthy, because I didn't know any of the biohacks, like getting more sunshine or cold therapy. We just didn't go outside. And I didn't know anything about animal fats and nutrition or anything. It's crazy. I think we really should be able to learn that, if not really in school, at least at home in our family. So that's what I've striven to do for my daughters, is to teach them, it's important to feel, to be nourished. And what is real nourishment? Like, how do you define health? How do you define nutrition? And really these days, like you were saying, there's so much of a vegan agenda because, that's the trend now, but no one is who's touting that is taking a step back and saying, well, how is this really nourishing to me? But then you could say it's an agenda by those who know how good meat is.
Right.
But when I was 25 also, and I had this, I turned 25 in the hospital with this ruptured appendix. I had been living in Kazakhstan for 2 years working. And there also, I was vegetarian. I wasn't eating, their traditional meats or foods. I was eating a lot of seed oils because that's what was dumped there by Europe at the time. And, there was no olive oil. Their olive oil was mostly sunflower seed oil. And so that was in all the food and the salads. And it definitely led to my health deteriorating. Now I can see it looking back. And that's one reason why I'm so adamant about really defying real health and really getting behind the animal fats and not, I know it is, I guess I have taken a bit of a dogmatic view too, just for the things that are really not nutritious to us.
Yeah.
And I just want, but I am swimming up the wrong stream or like against the stream right now. People have told me that's not, trendy. Why don't you go with something, plant-based? And that's just anathema to what I've learned.
I mean, like, one of the things is like trendy doesn't always mean correct, and trendy doesn't always mean healthy. But my original question was like, it sounds like you were cooking mostly vegetarian, and then you arrived in Bordeaux. So like, had you been cooking at all, or just like making things out of boxes?
Sorry about that. Yes. So I was making things out of boxes, like the nuggets and stuff, but we were eating boneless, skinless chicken breast and salmon, little frozen salmon pieces, I think farm raised, whatever we could get over there. That wasn't a real hunk of meat. I just didn't know how to cook that. So we did have some, I did have some recipes up my sleeve, before I went to Bordeaux, but I realized that I needed really to learn, because everyone around the world loves French food and reveres, French chefs. And so I thought, well, I gotta do this. So I jumped into some courses that are just for everyday people. There was a place called Atelier des Chefs where you could just go, sign up, pay your, 50 euros and learn a recipe. And then they had a class that was cooking a recipe and pairing it with wine. And so that got me into the wine. And then I ended up taking a year-long wine science and tasting course. at the University of Bordeaux, which was chemistry and French, which is not fun.
Oh
I
my
can tell you
God.
that. but so yeah, so the transition was also that, so we got to France and I was learning bit by bit little recipes, and then inspired, to learn how to cook duck. And then I served it to my girls, and they started bit by bit learning to eat new things, especially by our last year there, after I had done a butchery apprenticeship and had really learned about going from the piece of meat to the recipe. And I've noticed that even now my girls will feed them whatever kind of meat as the main thing, and they eat it, and they prefer to be well fed, which means having had some sort of really good animal protein, especially grass-fed beef. Steak is their favorite, and hamburgers. They're really conscious of how they feel if they don't eat that, if they eat too many sweets, or there's something made with seed oils, and they just they can tell the difference. So,
How old? How
we
old were they when you were in Bordeaux, Tanya?
yeah, they were gosh, we moved there, I think they were about 5 or 6 and 7 or 8,
Okay,
something like that.
nice.
Yeah, for 4 to 8, something like that.
Yeah,
And Moscow was sort of for our family dinners was kind of a desert compared to how I treated food and brought it into the home and prepared it in France, and really became comfortable with
sure.
kind of preparation. And there's been a transition since, where, like I said, now they're 18 and 15, and they, we see their friends who, a lot of them are really tired or they're depressed, and well, what are they eating and what are they not eating? It's very apparent.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty strongly about that sort of aspect of, being there for your family and for yourself too.
And I think some people don't know about the seed oil thing, or they see some things on social media, perhaps, or even in the mainstream press. And I'll tell you that, the reason you're saying a lot of these things, Tanya, about the seed oils, specifically calling them out, is number one, they've been purported to be healthier because they're polyunsaturated fats. And I did my master's thesis on the industrial production of vegetable and seed oils. So in my master's thesis, what I learned, which was unknown to me at the time, is that these vegetable or seed oils have toxic oxidation and secondary oxidation products in them when they're exposed to light, heat, or oxygen. And if you've ever bought a bottle of vegetable oil at the store, it's in a clear bottle, so therefore it's getting light into it. You open the top before you use it and store it somewhere, like on a pantry shelf, which means it's getting a bunch of oxygen into it, and you use it to heat or cook foods at a high temperature, so it's getting heat. So all these things are being done to further degrade the oil and create toxic oxidation products to the human body. But also, before it even gets bottled and put on the store shelf, it goes through a deodorization process. And that deodorization process is because it's rancid and they don't want you to smell it when you open the bottle. So they already know that this stuff's bad for you before they bottle it. So it's like you're right on with the seed oils. And like a lot of us just consume them without thinking about it, thinking they're healthy. And guess what? Not so much.
And that's a huge bunny hole to go down. I mean, there's so much more to that story too. I was just thinking, I wrote down seed oil class in my notes. That is, could teach a whole seed oil class in our courses. And I think people are, people are really interested in that too. And how did you learn more about the seed oil? Like, what was it, Weston A. Price?
Yeah, Weston A. Price. I'm trying to think. Weston A. Price and and Dr. Kate Shanahan. She's talked a lot about that. And she even talked about it on a podcast with Dr. Paul Saladino, known as Carnivore MD. And I've been listening to a lot of his podcasts kind of back going back the last few 3 years, and he talks a lot about the linoleic acid and the kind of downstream metabolites from seed oils that include, or the breakdown products of linoleic acid, which is one of the acids in the PUFAs, the polyunsaturated fatty acids. And that how traditionally, well, everyone says this, the Dr. Shanahan and Sally Fallon-Morell of Weston Price and Saladino, that, traditionally we didn't, no one ate this, our ancestors, and that's what I base my book on too, is what did the great grandmothers, for example, what were they able to create and prepare in their kitchens? They could squash an olive, they could, get the schmaltz or the fat from chickens, the lard. My ancestors are German, and they would slaughter a pig every year and save everything, from nose to tail, and not waste anything, which is something that I also believe a lot in, is the no waste, nose to tail. There's a reason everything is there for us and the nutrition it provides. But the seed oils, it just time and again have proven to me to be just detrimental to health. And I just kind of seek out information about it. And it just seems to be really true. And looking back at my own appendix rupture and malnourishment, I think that really, the seed oils are just, and those would include, I don't know, we haven't called them out, but it's canola and safflower, cottonseed, sunflower, and canola. What was the other one? There's another.
There's safflower.
Safflower.
And there's a few others. And most people don't even know that canola oil is actually from the rapeseed plant. And so it's a rapeseed oil, but people didn't like that term on their labels. So the farmers farming rapeseed in Canada, it's a hyphenated name of Canadian or Canada oil, can oil, or canola became the name. So it was more palatable.
Yeah. And it's just, anyway, it's a really big issue because it's so ubiquitous. It was even spread to Kazakhstan in the early 90s, post-Soviet, you can't get away from it. And I feel like a lot of the disease today, modern disease, can be linked back to just overconsumption. If you look at traditional peoples, the Hadza and some of the others, their percentage of this linoleic acid is very low, 1 to 2% in their diet, maybe from a nut or a seed occasionally. But really our traditional diet, I believe, is extremely low in those and extremely high in saturated fats. And I think we need more of it in northern climes, probably.
Yeah.
So, people who are depriving themselves of animal fats and red meat are just doing themselves a huge disservice. And
So Tania, what would you say, like, how do you kind of define, like, what is real nourishment?
Oh, I like that question. I had some note here where I had like some really pithy, wait, hang on.
I like that word, pithy.
Yeah. Well, nourishment to me just means to be, to be able to live your true life, to do what you were meant to do. And the nourishment, the way I define it in terms of food specifically, is I feel like I said before, the saturated fat and red meat content needs to be pretty much the majority of our diet, at least. At least if we're maybe if you're on the equator, you can eat a lot of coconut and fish and get by. But I think north or south of that, most people, I think, need just a high amount of protein and saturated fat. And for me, that comes in the form of beef, grass-fed beef, if possible, because of the whole PUFA problem, where you have, pork is high in PUFAs and chicken is high in PUFAs, and a lot of the fish is contaminated. So I tend to not focus on fish. If I'm in an area, the coastal area, and they have, certain cool fish on the menu, of course I'll try it. But to me, being truly nourished is to, have a clear head, have energy, really be able to express what it is you've come here to do. And, like Joel Salatin says, we are stewards of the earth. And I just feel like it's part of our expression and part of our role to be in the cycle of life, and not to step out of it, and say, oh, I'm not going to eat, I don't want to kill animals. I just want to eat my vegetables. Well, the other thing about vegetables is that I find a lot of them have, phytic acid and oxalic acids, and the fiber for me personally, after all of this, appendix rupture and malnutrition, and then losing a lot of weight and almost losing my life, it's hard for me to digest anyway, the fibers, and it's just easier to digest meat and fruit and honey and that kind of thing, or raw dairy. So to me, it's and liver. That's the big one. If you can't eat anything else, just eat some liver now and then.
So you've got written in the show, in the handout that you sent to us, it says that bit about we're stewards of the earth with the Joel Salatin, and then you have Diana Rogers, you can't feed people of the world nutrient deficient food to feel better morally. Like, I read that and I was like, whoa, like I've always felt that too. But I did that program with my kids back when they were in the government indoctrination camp called school. And I went to the facility to, scoop the food, and we were feeding the starving children, and then the food was going to be sent to blah, blah. And I was like, well, what's this? And they're like, oh, that's soy. And they're like, what? And I was like, what's that? And they're like, oh, that's corn. And then I was like, what's that? And then they're like, that's wheat. And I'm like, what? I was like, and this was, my kids were younger. They're all like in their early 20s right now. But like, I was like, this isn't right. There's something wrong with this picture. And like, just because, and like, I felt that though. So when I read that and you wrote that, I was like, whoa, something inner tuning fork was like, that was going off a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear more about that. I don't know if this is the time to do that, but you brought up the Joel Salatin. So it was like right before that.
So getting back to, you were asking me about the definition of nutrition. And so the definition of health to me would also be like just that love, self-love and sovereignty, right? Food sovereignty, and being able to choose and not be stuck in some agenda. And really what I say a lot in the book is just harken back to the ancestors, their wisdom. Why did they do what they did? Why did they slaughter the pig? There were nutrients there. Why did they all have a cow for milk? So anyway, understanding our past rather than running away from it, which I feel like progress is not really, it's more it's more running away from the past than addressing it head on and saying, wow, what can we learn, and how can we grow and develop and be better people, rather than just forget all the lessons learned and pretend like we don't need nutrition, or we don't need sleep, and we don't need sunshine, which it seems like is what the prevailing sort of lifestyle is in our modern day.
Yeah, there's a badge of honor that used to be given to the people that didn't need to sleep. Remember that whole thing?
Yeah,
like, that's
for sure.
Still there.
Yeah.
And what you're saying about feeling nourished and thinking about our ancestors and, ancient practices that people have had forever that nourished our biology. There's food sovereignty movement and knowing yourself, like knowing what you want to put into your body and checking into what feels nourishing. That's why I love that where you said, like, I want my daughters to feel nourished. And so, like, when you check in and you start to know yourself better,
Yeah.
you'll know what nourishes you. And there should be no agenda in your mind as to what you feed yourself. So you
Yeah.
can eat a vegetarian diet, you can eat a carnivore diet, but you need to check in with yourself. And what I'm seeing as you were talking through like the be nourished and what did our ancestors do, there's this movement right now, as of, it's January 2024, and there's the Veganuary movement right now in the UK. So
Oh.
700,000 people in the UK have signed up for this Veganuary, and I get these legal notices that come to me for my corporate job.
Yeah.
And so I get all these attorneys summarizing things. And the attorneys said there's 700,000 people from the UK who signed up for Veganuary, and the entire program is being created and pushed by the food processing companies, not organically. And so just be careful, like what you sign up for. And what we heard from our earlier podcast with Jason Christoph is you can be psychologically manipulated into adopting certain ways of eating
Yeah.
that are not good for you. And
Yeah.
so this whole concept in this podcast today, and Tanya, you're like, that really hit home for me is like, you want to be nourished and you want your daughters to be nourished, and to know what that feels like is so important.
Not to be listening to some, like Instagram influencer who's pushing the vegan agenda, right? Everything plant-based. And I do want to read one quick thing from your book too. You guys, this is like right on the shirt tails of that. And you have in this part where it's the French art and tradition of food and wine, chapter 3, you talk about in the late 1300s, there was this document that said meal cooking manual by Talavant, and
Taïwan.
Taivon.
You know?
And it really caught my eye. And I was like, I really want to bring this up. So it goes on to say it presents the way in which meals, you guys, 1300, right? It presents the way in which meals and vegetables are to be prepared for the upper classes and royalty. Like, what were they? This is what they were cooking, right? Like meat and vegetables for the upper class and the royalty. Isn't that interesting? Like, what did they give to lower classes?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You mean like what were they? I mean, if they were giving meat and vegetables to the upper classes, what did the rest of the population get? Well, yeah, the sort of easier to grow grains, or yeah, just porridge, and
right.
kind of Marie Antoinette let them eat bread, sort of. It's, in grad school, I took a course. It was something related to the United Nations and some of the feeding programs, and I did a whole paper on, oh, how great they're trying to feed this particular country with these, I don't know what they were sort of meal bars. And like you were saying, Heidi, if I recall correctly, I mean, they were just grains sort of bunched up together just for a subsistence, just to keep them barely, in existence, to say they did a good job.
Right.
And not really addressing the fact that we all need, carnitine and riboflavin and all the, B vitamins, and that you can't get certain vitamins except for in red meat and liver.
Right.
So yeah, I think and actually the way the recipes moved through Europe was through royalty. And I think a lot of them actually originated in Italy.
Oh,
and
sure.
France, and then they kind of, switched around. But yes, I think there was a lot of care taken, and you can even see in some of the old tables of like shopping lists that
Mm,
there was a certain kind of animal fat or butter on the list, tallow, lard. And in the case of the Southwest, it was duck fat, Southwest of France. It's very interesting that there was some wisdom about it, but you're right that there's a lot of kind of maybe corporate mind control or sort of group think that takes you so you don't even think about what you need. You just say, oh yeah, I'll buy that, whatever's marketed. And that's the trap we're in with the seed oils, I think.
mm-hmm.
And it really goes to show like the foods that you talk about in your book, The Bordeaux Kitchen, these traditional French foods and traditional French cooking, like they're not advertised. And so if there's an advertisement or a marketing campaign behind something, it's typically not something you want to put into your body because it's going to be a ultra processed or a processed food.
Right.
The French way of cooking and eating traditional foods, there's no marketing budget behind that.
Yeah. Well, and their lifestyle, right? Like you have one of your bullet points here. It says you learn from the French about lifestyle, like be outside, eat
Yeah.
seasonally, right? We eat seasonally outside.
Yeah.
I mean, we put them all together, right? But it is it's a lifestyle. And like that's a lot of the thing that we talk about too. It's like this isn't a diet, it's not a fad. Well, in your book, you call it a fad because it's the French ancestral diet, which is so cute, right? So it is like the fad diet, but it's really we call it a way of eating and a lifestyle. And I think like you were awakened to all this stuff. This stuff found you, right? And I feel like you're just this like incredibly sensitive magnetic force that's like pulling this all together and then like delivering your art, like this is an absolute work of art. And we have a signed copy and they're out of print. So haha. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm
But
trying to figure that out.
I know. But would you like tell us kind of weave a story or something about like what was it like to be in those markets in France and Bordeaux and like talking to the French butchers and like how did that feel? It's so different from the way we operate, like in America.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I'm kind of addicted to it. So I go back to Bordeaux every year and to
Okay.
France. And what's so lovely is it's the relationships that are
Mm-hmm.
created. And there might be very temporary relationships there's someone else in line and you chat with them and they say, oh, yeah, well, how did you do that piece of meat? And then how do you prepare this or that? But it's so nice when you come up to let's say the cheese, the young woman who does the cheese, she follows me on Instagram now. There's one woman in Bordeaux and she's seen me now a few times when every year when I go buy some cool cheese from her. And it's just that it's those relationships. And that's what takes me back again and again.
Yeah. Cool.
And to the shop owners or the wine makers, these sort of friendships that have built. But the markets are just so fun, wherever you go, every town has one or more markets on any given day. And that feeling of being, again, it's usually outside and they have all the beautiful products. It's local and regional, and people have a strong sense of pride in their products and their regions in France, which is what makes it so wonderful to go back to France. It's because they've maintained their regions, and even they say what grows together goes together. So with the wine and food pairings, in Burgundy you'll get the boeuf bourguignon, so the beef dish with the Burgundy wine, and it's that whole feeling that everything has its place and it smells good and tastes great. And yeah.
I'm just like, take me with you.
Yeah. Well, I may do a tour again next year to Bordeaux, so 2025.
Okay, I'm putting it on my wish list.
Okay.
So I think that's something. Why don't you talk about that? So, Tania, you offer tours guided
Yeah.
tours, right, to Bordeaux. So do you want to talk about that?
And
Yeah,
Switzerland.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last, I guess it was 2022, because last year was 2023, right? I'm still trying to
Yeah.
get used to the numbers. So I did a tour to Bordeaux. It turned out to be 8 ladies, including me, and we stayed in a villa in Saint-Emilion, which is a UNESCO protected city. It's basically made of limestone that was carved out from underneath, and to make wine caves, basically to store the wine that they made around Saint-Emilion. The Bordeaux region is a good region for making wine because of its parallel, right? Its latitude, I guess. Between 40 and 45 is where you can grow good wine. And anyway, so we stayed in this small town and drove into Bordeaux a couple of times, but it was really to introduce the ladies who came on the tour to my friends in Bordeaux. And it turned out to be that actually the people, the French wine vintners, were mostly women. It was women entrepreneurs. That's just how it ended up, which was very interesting and empowering for the American guests. And then, so this year I'm doing a tour to Switzerland. I did one this past year as well for hiking. So yeah, last year I did a tour to the Swiss Alps, also kind of a culinary related, because I don't know if you know this, but Weston A. Price, Dr. Weston Price, actually traveled, around the world conducting his research. And one of the places he went to was a valley. It's kind of hidden valley in Switzerland. And so when we were posted to Switzerland after Bordeaux, I really wanted to go see that valley. And it's stunningly beautiful. I call it God's Cathedral. It's so beautiful. And so I organized, I've gone there several times to hike, and then I organized a tour last year, and I'm doing one for this year. So if anyone's interested, they should let me know. But hiking and food in the evenings, we'll be cooking a few nutrient-dense meals that are sort of Swiss French. So yeah, those are the tours. It's focused on, kind of healthy, what I call healthy, nutrient-dense living, really. The hiking, the being outside, the drinking water from that's alpine fresh, and breathing the fresh air. And you're at 2,000 meters altitude, so you're actually building up red blood cells and kind of adapting to, I guess, less oxygen in the air.
So something just came to mind. So I've always been just a little bit intrigued by my name, Heidi. And my parents, my dad named me. And just recently we were in northern Wisconsin. We stumbled upon this magical used rare bookstore. And I picked up a copy of those little golden books, and it was Heidi. And you know what that story is about? It's about this girl in the Swiss Alps named Heidi, who goes to the city and kind of rescues this girl, I think it's like a cousin or whatever. And the cousin is like anemic and she's weak. She's like super sick. And you know what Heidi does? She invites her up into the mountains to get some fresh mountain air. The little girl shows up with her dad or whatever, and she spends like a couple weeks with Heidi in the mountains, and she's like completely healthy again, well nourished, and then she goes back to the city.
Well, she was in a wheelchair and then gets up and walks.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, I didn't even know that. Did you know that? Like, that story was about exactly like what you just described in Switzerland. I know. I wanted to go on that trip so bad. We'll get there one of these days.
One of these days we'll keep doing it, and hopefully you can come along.
Oh my God.
Asking about the tours.
Sounds so magical. And one other thing I was going to comment too, in the beginning of your book, you show the different regions and the different types of fat that they use in all the different regions. So there's like duck fat, tallow, butter and whatever. Could you just talk a little bit about that and like why is that? I'm curious.
Oh yeah, yeah. So like I said, they're very proud of their regional products, right? They're kind of the French love their surroundings, and they're very proud of what it is that they produce, whether it's wine or cheese or some other food or product, agricultural product. But yeah, because so in Normandy, for example, the north,
Mm.
they have a lot of dairy cows, and so they have a lot of recipes using butter.
Mm.
They have plenty, milk is plentiful there. And then in this let's say Provence, where it's quite hot and rocky, they have that goats thrive there, so they have a lot of goat cheese, for example, and olive trees, olive oil, so they so they use a lot of olive oil and goat cheese in the recipes, and that's what's there.
Okay.
And hand pressed olive oil, I'm going to add, because not sort of, another thing about the seed oils is that they're highly processed in factories that never existed back then. And then we have these sort of, it's kind of Germanic, the Alsace-Lorraine area of sort of the east side of France that borders with Germany, that has a lot of that Germanic influence of using lard and eating pork products.
Okay.
And then the southwest of France, which they have a lot of ducks, a lot of fowl. So ducks and geese are really part of their, and liver pates, and so they thrive there. So you can go to see, for example, the Paleolithic caves of Sarlat, and go get a meal of duck leg confit, and then potatoes in duck fat, and it's so rich and delicious. And then the tallow, I think, it's actually, I would say it's a traditional fat that was used back when you were looking, the 1300s to maybe the more like before the world, before maybe the 1900s, because that's around the time when margarine started. That tallow was used as a cooking fat. And but it's hard to find, you would be hard pressed to find any recipe in France now, or anywhere really, in the modern world, or in a modern cookbook that uses tallow. It's all oil, the cooking oils. And I think it's the ubiquitousness of the seed oils, the marketing, the fierce monocropping that has just taken over. Whereas tallow, it seems like talking about animal products is really sort of not politically correct, and it's connected with other things like climate change, which I think erroneously, but nevertheless, it's tallow is just kind of been, and even any animal fat has been pushed by the wayside. And you would find in restaurants in France, even high quality restaurants, they're probably using a seed oil. If they're not using clarified butter just has the proteins removed so it doesn't burn, but that's more expensive because you have the butter and then you clarify it and you only have maybe three quarters of it left, or half. And just from a dollars and cents point of view, it's difficult to make money in the food industry without using cheap products.
And that's ghee, right? Clarified butter is same as
ghee.
Okay.
It's also known as ghee. Yeah.
Okay. I just have one more thing. What about foie gras?
Foie gras.
Oh my God, it's literally my favorite.
It's so good. Yeah.
Oh.
It's a controversial topic because
yeah.
because of the way that the ducks are fed, and they're sort of kind of force fed, or they're given like a little siphon to eat the maximum amount of food.
Mhm.
And so some people who are for it, they say, well, that's their use. They don't know anything else. That's just then people who are opponents of this say, well, it's fatty liver, but that's what makes it so delicious, is that it's
Mm.
the fat. So, but it is a traditional kind of pate, the foie gras, made from duck or goose liver, and usually eaten around the New Year. And in
Oh,
Bordeaux, they'll have it around the New Year, and then have sweet wine with it, because Bordeaux also makes sweet wines.
really?
Yeah,
Huh.
it's fun there. I want
Oh my God, I'm so hungry now.
I know, me too.
I had foie gras on French toast at this fancy restaurant in Minneapolis, and it was literally like the most decadent, like it's so undescribable, you
It's
know? I mean, I can't imagine like in that duck region.
Yeah. Well,
What?
it's interesting that you mentioned that. I'll just say quickly that my
Yeah,
gateway drug to organ meats, which are
yeah.
the most nutrient dense of all foods, really, in my opinion, especially liver, it was liverwurst. And
Mm.
when I was growing up going to visit my family in Germany, I would stay with my grandmother, and she would give me, on the nice dark bread, the German dark bread, like some liverwurst smeared, and it was really almost sweet because they mix it with cream and maybe a little bit of sugar, but it's just so good.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of nutrients in it, and that's a good way to get kids to eat something like an organ meat. So that's something that I gave my kids when they were little, growing up, to kind of enjoy that, and they still like it. You can get it in the US in certain stores.
Yep. Is it also called Braunschweiger? Is that the thing?
Yeah,
Is that different?
Braunschweiger is like I think it's just maybe it's a kind, like it's a certain treatment of the
Oh,
but I know US Wellness Meats sells one,
okay.
they call it Braunschweiger, and they have different consistencies too. So different people make them different ways. Some are with sort of more like almost crunchier, and some are really smooth
Hmm.
and creamy. So it depends. You have to do a liverwurst taste test next time,
Yeah, right.
in Germany or Switzerland or France, where they do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna on the organs, I want to ask you a couple more questions on the organs specifically. And as you're talking about like the fatty liver, I was just thinking through, like I just read this article, and fatty liver, like that's what we men and women get, but it's typically due to eating too many sugars. And like refined sugars is when you get fatty liver, not by eating fats, which is really interesting. You would think counterintuitively you would eat a lot of fat and get fatty liver, but it's actually eating too many sugars, because remember, the body can only take in so much sugar or glucose, and then it has to store the rest as fat. So the liver works overtime to process this extra sugar. And then it creates these fats in the liver that then you get this fatty liver disease. And I just thought it was interesting, like talking about the foie gras and then the fatty liver that we men and women are getting, not me, hopefully, but people that are over consuming sugars, ultra processed foods, and sweetened, like both beverages and foods. And so then it brings me back to like the organ meats, Tanya. Those are the things that we get rid of. Like you send me the liver, and I get a chicken and I pull all that stuff out and get rid of it. Or whenever somebody, if I'm buying a quarter of a cow or a half of a cow at a time and getting it delivered, most people are like, what do I do with these things? And I keep hearing you say like those are the best parts. So like
Yeah.
why are the organs so beneficial? Like what's the deal with organs?
Oh, the deal with organs is they are the multivitamins that we need, especially liver. It's got so many things. Iron, K2, D3, B12, choline, zinc, taurine. I mean, it just goes on and on. And red meat as well, a little bit less of the B or the B12, and some of the nutrients vary from organ to organ, but they're basically multivitamins. Like the thymus that has a lot of sort of immune qualities, or what do you say, sort of proponents to it. And I have a cheat sheet somewhere of all the little, each organ and its sort of special things and vitamins that it has, but it's basically like they're concentrated parts of the animal where we have nutrients more so than even the muscle meats, because those organs perform important functions, and it's very different from the muscle meat. And for example, the heart has a lot of mitochondria concentrated in it, and so that's really a good, also a good source of riboflavin, one of the B vitamins. So it's just, the list goes on and on when you talk about the organ meats. There's so much in there, and it shouldn't just be ground up for dog meat. And what's amazing is that every culture that, when I talk to people in my travels, I always ask them, so do you have, whether they're from Africa or Asia or elsewhere, Latin America, I'll ask, so do you ever eat, or does any of your traditional food include, the liver or any organs? And they say, oh yeah, and they, but they also say how they don't eat it here in the US anymore. And I think we've just lost that connection to our past, to traditions. But what I found with the French is that they still always have, they'll have beef and sheep, like kidneys, and beef or veal liver on hand, really always at the butcher shop. And oxtail, so oxtail includes the marrow inside the oxtail bones. And they, something on the menu in France is the marrow bones, which is really good for your own, immune system and blood building. And that's extreme nutrient density there, and very easy to get. Just roast a marrow bone for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, add a little salt, and you've got your mega multivitamin right there. So just organ meats to me are so amazing in that way. And that's why I've been actually trying to write a follow-on book of recipes, so that people can, it so demystifies how to cook them. And really the French way is usually to keep it simple. And they eat a lot of raw, steak tartare or things, raw eggs, but or they'll lightly cook things, and you don't necessarily need to overcook organ meats. They're very delicate. And so anyway, that's just something that I feel strongly about and been trying to work on as well. And a video course too, to sort of show people, because that's the sort of the fun way, is to learn from someone directly. If you can't do it one-on-one, then through a video. But organ meats is sort of like they're on their own pedestal, like tallow is, to me at least.
We just had marrow bones the other night. It's one of the things Thaddeus and I, or he makes for us for date night once in a while, especially in the winter.
Oh, nice.
And he surprised me the other day. I didn't even know he had him in the oven. He's like, I have dinner, here's our first course or whatever. And I was like, oh, marrow bone. Like, I was so excited. And we put a little seasoning and some beautiful sea salt on it. And oh my God, it lasted 2 days? Because, we eat a little bit of it at each meal for 2 days. And it's like, it's so true. Like, you just feel so nourished from that.
Yeah.
So, and you don't need a lot. Like, that's the thing too.
Exactly. It's also the base for a lot of sauces. French cooking is marrow. So it's just, it ups the nutrient density for a sauce over a meat as well. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, we're like so excited for your next book. And it really is intimidating though, to think about, like, for myself, like, if I were to go out and be like, okay, I have all these organs, like, what the fuck am I going to do with them now? Right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's
I don't
scary.
know. Yeah.
Because you don't want to waste them and you'd want to
Right.
do it right and not, yeah, I understand. But if all else fails, you can also make a pate, just ground it up
Okay.
in heat, apply heat, and then it should be edible. I mean, they do a lot of that's kind of what a meatball is, or a pate. You can I know Paul Saladino, he makes heart burgers, so he just grinds up heart meat and
Mm.
makes patties out of it. So there are ways to kind of almost hide it too,
Mhm.
grind it up into patties. And I think actually there's some, I think Force of Nature now, I think they have some where they'll sell a pound of grass-fed beef, but it's mixed with a little bit
Right.
of liver and a little bit of heart. And you can do that at home if you can get a good grinding machine.
Okay.
That's on my wish list too, is to be able to
Mm.
make my own, and then
Mm.
maybe a big batch and then freeze smaller parts of it, so that you always have that mixture, that little multivitamin in there
Mhm.
each meal.
Right, right. What do you have any?
Well, I think one of those concepts of like, number one, you don't want to waste the organs and you want them to taste good. So you'll actually eat them. So that's part of some people's hesitation. So I just
Yeah.
love that you're going to do a cookbook specifically on organs. And it's like, oh, it's so much more accessible now. If I get the organs from my local farmer, now
Yeah.
I've got, this recipe book and I know it's going to taste good. And then we also get from our local farmer. So of course, everywhere we've ever lived, we know the local farmers and we get, grass-fed, humanely treated animals. And there's one mixture that they make for us called beef, pork, and organs, and it's ground. And so all the organs are already in there along with some beef. So you can make burgers right out of that, or, tacos. And it's a really good way to get the nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
That is really easy way. That's great.
Yeah.
I want to try
So
that.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate though. We've got a really great local source.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows about those things too. So I think it's it's like one of those things you can get into a CSA. You can learn, who is in your local neighborhoods and your local farmers. Like there's
Yeah.
is it trying to Farm Match?
farm match.
Farm Match is the
Oh yeah.
place that links people up. So yeah. So everybody
We're
has
lucky.
access.
We're lucky to be in an area. Well, we're in Virginia, so we're supplied by deliveries from Polyface, from Joel Salatin's farm. Yeah, so we can get it from the real deal.
No way.
That's
Oh my
amazing. I'm
God.
jealous.
And one of his sort of apprentices, a fellow named Jesse, he has his own farm called Whiffle Tree, which is also available here at our butcher shop, which is nice too. So we kind of have a little, I guess Virginia has, more farmland than one would know if living close to DC,
Mhm.
but there are farms where you can, hopefully locally, which that's great that you have one, but people could look up, the farm match, is that sort of nearby farms then that would match you in your state or something.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good resource.
Yep. Yeah. We hand that out a lot. We're like, go to Farm Match.
So I think we're gonna end the first hour here. So you want to catch us on the other side with a full membership, where we're going to talk with Tania about lots of subjects, including she's got an entire line of animal-based beauty care products that are phenomenal. If you've only applied, typical beauty care products that are usually made of actual pharmaceutical ingredients, because I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry and the beauty care industry. We use petroleum-based products in those industries. That's normally what people are putting on their faces. And if you've never put like an all-natural product, let me tell you, it's night and day difference. So we're going to talk about that over in hour two. Tania, one more time, where can people find you if they want to get into all the things that you do?
Yeah, thanks. So BordeauxKitchen.com is where I'm at. You can contact me from there. You can also find me on Instagram at Tania Teschke.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
So Tania, in hour one, you said something that I wanted to discuss a little bit deeper on this hour of the podcast, which is if we, we always hear the story, like animal products can't feed the world. So we have to have industrial agriculture with monocropped corn and soy to feed everybody. And you had said something about like, we can't feed the world population nutrient deficient foods and feel good about ourselves morally. Can you talk a little bit more about like, what did you mean by that and what should we do?
Well, I think Diana Rogers is the reference that you gave for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right. I mean, her point, and the point here is that, everyone says, oh, feed the world, right? It's been that for decades. We have to feed the world, or we can't feed the world. And first of all, I think if we all just focused on our own family first and our own selves, and even going deeper and just to self-love, loving yourself and your reason for being here and accepting it. I mean, it's something we're all working on, right? I mean, I know I am. It's sort of a process of becoming a little wiser and more at peace with
If
the world.
if we need to feed the world population,
Oh, yeah.
like there's hungry people and everyone says like, how do you feed them? So we use industrial agriculture with all these petrochemicals and fertilizers that are synthetic, and we pour them on the earth and we monocrop corn and soy and wheat to feed everybody. Like, it seems like that's a nutrient deficient way to feed people. And you had made this comment about, is that even morally appropriate to do that?
Yeah. Well, so again, we need to focus on what is nutrient dense for ourselves, what's going to nourish us. And if we really look at what nourishes a human, it's not these monocropped grains, for example, or the end product of oils that kind of create processed food that we then want to just sort of feed to the others, feed to the masses, because really each of us is an individual and cares for his or her family, and it only wants, the best wherever we are and whatever kind of stage of life or status in life that we have. And the monocropping has become such a like an ingrained part of our modern world that it's hard to get away from the thought that we created it, we created the problem. And I just don't think that those cereal bars or these dumped seed oils in Kazakhstan, for example, nourish people at all. In fact, it slowly kills them. So you have on the other side a more life accepting and life oriented approach, which is regenerative agriculture. At least that's the name we put on it right now, is regenerative agriculture, which means we are not only feeding whoever benefits from the particular farm that is practicing regenerative agriculture, but we are growing new soil. We're creating an environment where there's more microbes and then biodiversity around that farm that is allowed to flourish, as compared to the monocropping where, you want to even a lot of the fruits and vegetables, I would say more vegetables that are row cropped, it's still, the land is tilled and we sort of clear it and we thereby kill whatever organisms are there, including the snakes and mice and birds and other wildflowers and bees and habitats, and decimate for the sake of creating, a soy plot to sort of feed people in order to feel better about what? It just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. I think regenerative agriculture, it helps save you from drought, because it creates soil and just the way that the animals are moved from paddock to paddock, it nourishes the soil. And I really think we should bring back, if there were some way to, rather than the Dust Bowl of America, bring back the bison and have that, sort of regenerative aspect to our now almost barren agricultural lands.
Mhm.
But anyway, I just, the regenerative agriculture sort of feeds into this idea also of loving or respecting the earth and the animals. And so when people say, well, I'm going vegetarian or vegan because I love animals, it just doesn't make any sense to me when you see what the other side of the coin is. So, and I mean, I was trying to think about this. It seems like when we accept our role in the cycle of nature, it's more, we're accepting a lifestyle as opposed to a death style, which to me is what monocropping really, and you go further, and monocropping feeds people poorly. They get sick, they need more pharma, and it's this terrible death cycle, in my opinion, instead of the health cycle that is really us being stewards of the earth and eating nourishing foods and helping others, create regenerative farms, and rather than just shipping over oils and processed foods. It just the morality, I just don't even see how it's moral. It doesn't make any sense to me. So that's just what I've been learning as I've been, kind of thinking about all of these things.
Yeah, it's kind of that concept of when you put something in your body, is it increasing your life force, or is it taking life force to deal with the thing you put in your body? So I feel like the industrial seed oils and the wheats and the grains, not that those are necessarily bad, but they're delivered to men and women and children in a way that they have binding agents on the nutrients that are in there. So they aren't allowed to give up their nutrients. And that's because, like a seed or a nut in nature, it doesn't want to just like sprout in the middle of winter and immediately die. That wouldn't be life-giving to the plant. So it creates these inhibiting agents for the nutrients inside the plant to disallow itself to grow. And if you think about both seed oils and grains, they're seeds, and these things have inhibiting functions so that they only sprout and deliver nutrition to the plant as it grows at the right time. And so those things are all being distributed without removing those inhibitors. There's a way to do it through Weston A. Price Foundation, which we talked about. They talk about how traditionally people were able to eliminate those things. And in a regenerative agriculture practice, like you were mentioning, the animals are part of the process of regenerating the land. Because if you think about all of history of forever, animals and plants coexisted. You didn't kill all the animals and monocrop, and you didn't kill all the crops and just raise animals. You always had a symbiotic relationship so that the animals delivered nutrition to the soil, and the soil produced enzymes and bacteria and all the nutrients for the plants that the animals consumed, and the cycle repeats on and on. And without both of those things combined, you just don't get real sustainability. So I even think the vegetarian agenda, which I used to be vegetarian and I was vegan, and I didn't like how animals were treated, and I was not very healthy during that time. But what I found is, like, you have to have this coexistence, and you have to have both things living symbiotically to really create true environmental sustainability, but also like food source sustainability. Like, we're drying up our sources of foods and nutrition when we kill the soil, and we strip, if we're monocropping, we're stripping that soil. So we strip the corn and soy and we ship it to Kazakhstan. And so where is the compost that would have been put back on the soil, either by the animal eating it right there and pooping right there, or by tilling everything back into the soil? We ship it across the world, we deplete the soil and we only add 3 nutrients back: NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. We're not adding any micronutrients. We're not putting animal compost there. And so we're just like completely destroying all aspects of regenerative growth.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a
Beautifully
I think it's a really good segue into the beauty care products, because I mean, how many times do you see, well, I've seen people posting about the mistreatment of animals by the beauty care industry, right? And my daughter is like a really huge proponent in that. And she's like, she follows a lot of people that speak really openly about it. And when you see some of those videos, like, it makes you want to vomit in your mouth, right? Like, it is the worst. And when Thaddeus, bought me for our anniversary, your beauty care products, I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, it's tallow. So like I did like I paused for a second, right? I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so I really don't like the animal testing. And then these products are animal based. And I was like, okay, I'm a little confused, but I'm going to try it. And I'm intrigued because I'm super open, right? My pineal gland is open and ready. And I'm interested in learning more. So then, Tanya, we meet you, or I have a phone conversation with you, and you start talking about like, this is actually a more sustainable, regenerative farming is more sustainable than the other plant-based, or what they do, to the animals that are being tested on. I was like, I'm all in, right? Like, this is amazing. So I'd love for you to just let's hear your story. Like, how did you start mixing these things? How did you just let's hear all of it.
Thanks, Heidi. Well, so I learned all of these tricks of the trade with the French cooking, right? And nutrient density, and then about the fats. And we talked about the different regions of France and the fats that they use. And I, at the same time, while I was writing the book, I was also was experimenting with lip balm of my own, because it's expensive to buy this stuff, right? And there's a company, it's a biodynamic company in Germany called Veleda. And they, for years, I'd been using their beeswax and shea butter lip balm. And I thought, gosh, I'm learning all about how nutrient dense these animal fats are. What about tallow? Could that have been used in products? Would ancestors have used that? I mean, it was there. And lard, it was kind of plentiful in a way. When you slaughter an animal, you don't want to waste anything, right? And I don't want to waste anything. So I looked it up, and I saw that, yes, in fact, tallow products are, there were some kind of people making their own, but it's a traditional ingredient for skincare. And, so if we cook with it, why can't we also put it on our bodies? And I really wanted to try that. So I experimented, and then I ended up creating my own sort of lip balm, and which ended up also being good for the hands, because I've always had, dry hands. And so I created, and I used essential oils, because that's the most natural thing I could find to mask the smell of tallow, because you might not want to smell like a cow. And so I just developed it from there. But my first sort of flavor was lavender vanilla, and my family loved it. My girls, my husband, my cousins, my mom. I would send it around and say, hey, how do you like this? And they all loved it. And so we were still in Switzerland overseas. This is in, 2016, 17, and 18. And I thought, well, when I go back to the US, there's this thing called Etsy, and maybe I could try selling some of these things. Because when I was little, I always wanted to make stuff and sell it. But you know how little kids will make something and they think they can sell it. It's like a little coaster, or it's adults will say, okay, yeah, I'll buy it from you to be nice.
Mhm.
But I thought I really want to create value for others and just share my discovery.
Mm.
And and as you can tell, I'm very excuse me, I'm all about nutrient density. And tallow has also D3, K2, vitamin A, vitamin E. It's packed with nutrients compared to, I don't know, whatever store brand or department store, even more expensive brand, has to offer you. And a lot of the kind of more natural, so-called natural products are made with sunflower seed oil.
Mm.
And so I've tried to just develop products that are, really tallow based. The majority is tallow, and they seem to be working. People enjoy them. You were saying, Heidi, you like the face cream, which is kind of my luxe level thing. Special oils, but mostly tallow and beeswax.
Okay.
And then some other saturated butters. But yeah, so and it was so we moved back in 2019, and in 2020, of course, we had the scamdemic, and I was home and thinking about this anyway, and so I developed the name. So I kind of, it's like a branch off Bordeaux Kitchen Naturals from my book, because I toyed around with other ideas, but names, BU or something like that. But it just ended up being, Bordeaux Kitchen Naturals worked. And I just started developing products that I needed, like deodorant or face cream or facial cleanser, but all really with the tallow as the base, because again, tallow has the highest percentage of saturated fat, and actually it has a high percentage of stearic acid, which you'll find in a lot of cosmetics as kind of a preservative, but in tallow it occurs naturally. And so it just seemed to me like a natural fit.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's so brilliant. And the oils that you've combined, the lavender, ginger, lime, these are the deodorants. Those of you who are listening can't see these, but they're packaged so brilliantly too. And one of the things when my kids were in elementary school, they came home with a little packet, in fifth grade, and they're like, oh, we got the sex talk in school today, and they gave us this deodorant. And it was like a little thing of degree deodorant that every kid in school got handed that. And I was like, I was so mad. I was like, you are not going to indoctrinate my kids. So like I talked to them all about that. So I mean, I'm a huge proponent for natural deodorant. And let me tell you, you guys, like these work. Like, I mean, anything natural, you're going to have to apply a few times, right? And we're supposed to sweat. Like, what the fuck is wrong with people? Like, you're supposed to sweat with your body. You're not supposed to be antiperspirant, right? So, I mean, and I would argue too, like, if you're sweating profusely in a situation, like maybe you should not be in that situation. Maybe it's your body saying like, like there's something better in life or something. I'm picking on Thaddeus.
That's because I get nervous when I give big presentations and I do sweat. So I would argue that I should be there.
Well, no, I'm saying like
I don't want to stink
at your corporate job.
Yes. Well, let me say one thing I love about this, Tanya, is you said that these are ingredients you could eat. And I think people forget that the largest organ in our body is our skin. And whatever you put on your skin is going to end up in your body at some level. And if you're putting things on your body you wouldn't eat, they're going to end up in your bloodstream and in your body. And that's probably not something that you want. And then I worked for my first job for a corporation that made deodorant and antiperspirant, Procter & Gamble. So I made Secret, Sure, and Old Spice as my first job. And I will tell you that the formulators who invented those products do not wear their own product. They refuse to wear deodorant and antiperspirant from Procter and Gamble. So the ingredients, I mean, hexane diol, I mean, it even sounds scary, but those are some of the unnatural petroleum-based ingredients that are in the products that most people buy off the shelf. And you would never want to eat that. And it has a toxicological profile. You can only use like a teeny amount of it before it's toxic. Where the products you use, like I could eat the whole stick of deodorant, probably won't taste good, but I could totally eat it and it's not going to harm me.
And it doesn't have aluminum, which is
Yeah.
the main ingredient that I was trying to stay away from too,
Yeah.
was the aluminum. I mean,
Right.
that used to be, at least it used to be in deodorants that, when I was growing up as a teen and using deodorants, that's
It's still in there. And so what happens, so of course I studied this for many years when I was working at Procter and Gamble, is the sweat ducts fire sweat all day, whether you're visibly sweating like through your shirt or not. The sweat duct will fire sweat out of it and it'll suck back in. And so what happens with the antiperspirant is it's created in a way that it's a polymer that polymerizes or grows bigger when it gets wet. It's a metal polymer made from aluminum. And when we sweat and have that in our underarm, the liquid sweat grabs the aluminum polymer, it sucks it back into the body, deep into the sweat gland. And then because the water polymerizes the aluminum polymer, it grows and blocks your sweat gland from sweating with a metal polymer that's inside your body now. So that's actually how the antiperspirants work. And so you're drawing the aluminum from your skin deeper into your body every time it is quote unquote effective.
Gosh, it sounds like a post-COVID vaccine nightmare.
One of those adjuvants, they had aluminum. A lot of times they add these toxic products on purpose into vaccines because it makes the vaccine, quote unquote, I'm definitely putting in air quotes, more effective because it has to stimulate the body to create an immune reaction because there's a foreign invader. We have to marshal our resources and get this thing the heck out of here. So the aluminum and some of the thimerosal, the mercury, it's intended to make the body fight against it, and it's toxic on purpose put into your body. Not a good idea.
Not
for any reason.
Yeah. So these are natural or good on purpose. I try to put only good for you stuff, or what I know so far as being good for us, like tallow.
And honestly, so I've used a lot. So having worked for Procter and Gamble and looked at Old Spice and Secret and Sure, like I won't use any of those products. So I have sought out natural deodorants so that when I do sweat, I don't stink. And honestly, Tanya, I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast. The deodorants that you make last all day for me. I don't have to reapply them. I do have to reapply stuff I'll buy at like the natural food store or Whole Foods a couple times because for me it wears off.
Amazing. Wow, that's so good to hear. That's a beautiful endorsement. And I'm just so glad, gosh, because I always wonder too, like, is it working? It works I like it. And it works okay for me, though. I mean, I probably could formulate these things even more scientifically, but I just sort of trial and error. But it's great to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely an expert deodorant tester, and yours have blown me away versus anything else I've tried.
I just wrote down you're going to teach a deodorant class.
I'll attend.
Yeah, right. One other quick thing, I was going to mess with Thaddeus a little bit. Should we tell Tanya what we use this for?
What I use it for? Probably not.
The body butter.
So
the whipped body butter.
Okay.
She's like, oh shit, where are we going?
This is why this is an hour too. So if you know anything about us, like, and this crazy modern world we live in. So I'm a chemical engineer by training. So I know a lot of like all the crazy junk that's in our air, our water, our soil, and our food. And the body needs to detoxify itself. And sometimes we need support with that detoxification process. So I do, especially in the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of green coffee enemas. And I don't want to
Oh,
put a lubricated tube in my butt that contains like seed oils on it because I know I'm putting junk back in my
wow.
body that's going to go directly into my bloodstream. So I use some of the Bordeaux Kitchen body butter because I'm like, I can eat this. This is the only thing I feel safe putting in my body in any way.
Wow.
So I,
Wow.
I love that, like, not only can we use it for massages when we do date night, we can use it on our skin when it's dry, but like we can use it for all sorts of detoxification processes because it's
Wow.
such a clean chemistry that we're using.
How's that endorsement for you?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I don't know. I don't think anyone can top that one.
Right?
That's amazing.
You should be selling that endorsement to like the Gerson people and oh my goodness.
Wow,
That's
that's
too funny.
wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
that's interesting. It doesn't have beeswax in it. So I wonder if that is, helpful to like so that it doesn't stick around as long.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
Because beeswax is sort of like in my balms, which are really good for hands and lips. It's like a protectant, like a barrier kind of thing. And I think you hit on something there where the body butters don't have the
Mm.
beeswax in them. So there's more, I think a high proportion of tallow anyway. So
Yeah. And
wow.
you can smell, like I can smell the tallow in
Yeah.
this one a little bit more, but it still has the rose. And I think like it's for me, like that doesn't bother me at all because it is so luxurious. And like I love, just putting it on my skin. And then that smell, like it doesn't linger either. You would think
Yeah.
like because you don't want to smell like a cow, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
No, it just smells
yeah.
like rose and it's such a soft body
yeah.
butter.
Yeah.
It's really fun to like use and put on the hands and the
I
body. Like
know.
some body butters are really hard and when they get cold, they like our house stays pretty cold in the winter and it gets really hard and like then you're like putting wax on your skin, it
Yeah.
feels like
Mhm.
sometimes.
Okay, so you're talking about the rose
The
one.
whipped body butter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I have a different formulation, but this one has even more tallow than the other whipped body
Mm.
butters. The rose, yeah, I love
Okay.
that one. It's
Yeah.
mostly tallow, and so yes, you could eat it.
Yeah.
And so using it for those purposes is um, is the best choice, I would say, of them all.
Thanks, Heidi,
Yeah.
for putting that in the podcast.
Yeah,
You know
thanks for
what?
sharing.
What do we, this is about truth and like speaking our truth, right?
For
Like
sure.
these are multi-purpose products and like why be quiet
Yeah,
about
why
that?
not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my daughter walked in during that time. She was like, oh boy. Okay, so I think is there anything else that you guys want to I have one thing that I want to read like to kind of like before we say goodbye and like kind of do our closing.
Yeah.
So I'm reading this book. I just find shit in well, I should say that. Stuff finds books find me in little free libraries and
Like
they
that.
jump off
Yeah.
shelves, this Jillian Michaels book like jumped off the shelf at me and in the little free library and I started reading it. I was like, this was written in 2009. I was like, oh, this is pretty good. She's got some good stuff in here, but she does not quite get like some of the diet stuff right. She's got like people drinking skim milk and like some of that
Oh,
stuff. So
yeah.
I'm like, I'm not endorsing this by any means.
What's the name of the book?
It's well, I'm not endorsing it.
Okay.
It's called Master Your Metabolism. Anyway, I think Jillian's cool. I do some of her workouts, but she says something in here, you guys, that I want to read because I think it's really beautifully written. And I think like what we talked about here today is just like really pertinent to what kind of, like we can summarize. And so she says, you need to be an active participant here. You need to take responsibility and understand that Uncle Sam is not looking out for you. Big food companies are not on your side. Just because pesticides are legal, just because the USDA says hormones in beef are totally safe, just because your boss says you need to be married to your job 24/7 doesn't make it So you cannot bury your head in the sand anymore. The faux foods and chemicals and stress are messing with you on a genetic level, altering your hormones in an unrecognizable degree, poisoning your body and killing our planet one evil dollar at a time. This is not just about your waistline. This is about saving ourselves.
Mm.
Is that good?
Yeah.
I know. I was like,
very astute of her.
yeah. I was like, wow, because I mean, she's in the mainstream, right? And so you wouldn't expect that from
Yeah, you wouldn't.
somebody, like that. But do you have, like some parting words and like, some inspiration to kind of follow up with that?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I always heard, people tell me, because I'm always feeling like, well, what am I going to do when I grow up? And people say, well, just, follow your passion.
Mm.
And like this book kind of came to you, or other books came to you, things have come to me, I think, that I have had the honor of putting together in my own way that I can share with others. And I just I'm still in the process of feeling like that's okay to sort of let the artistic me express myself, and in order to help myself and eventually help others. So I would say to, anyone who's an entrepreneur or an artist at heart, or just wants to, feel like wants to express themselves, to really to feel like you can do that, because if you express the best part of you, that then the rest of us can benefit so much from that expression. And so I try to live by that. And I don't know, we're all just trying to do our best, I think, and learning to, forgive yourself for mistakes, or the learning process, because in the end, and just to me, focusing on relationships, including the one with myself, and relationship to food, to family, to friends, and to yourself. These are all things that have kind of, I realize, have helped me along the way. So that's what I would say.
Beautiful. Thank
Thanks,
you
Tanya.
so much, Tanya. Thank you for your time and, I mean, your depth of knowledge. And I mean, I would love to have you back again, talk about wine and even more
yeah.
and more organ meat stuff. Maybe when your next book comes out, or
Okay.
yeah.
It'll give me some motivation to get cranking.
That's right. Get that
Yeah.
one done.
Well, and we want to
Yeah.
cook more organ meat. So, I mean,
Yeah.
your people are here waiting for it.
Oh, thank you. Well, and maybe
Thanks.
we can do a video where we're cooking something together, like a video demonstration.
Yes, we want to come cook with you.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
thanks,
Okay.
guys.